So thanks everyone. Firstly, first of the parallel session, so I know you've all got a choice about coming in here or going in there or not going in either and going to the bar, so thank you for coming and listening. So I am the General Manager of Health, Safety Environment at Origin Energy, but I'm also a student in the Safety Science Innovation Lab with Drew and with Sydney and Michelle and others at Griffith. So I've got this hopefully interesting perspective that's sort of almost 20 years of professional practice and now deep, more academic curiosity about what the role of safety professionals actually is in organisations, has been and could be. The backdrop for my presentation is that the safety profession is entirely discretional. Organisations don't need to have us. In fact, many organisations don't have safety professionals. It's only in the last 30 years, or really in about the last 25 or 30 years, that we've existed as a profession, and it's still only in a small portion of companies that full-time safety professionals actually exist. So in 2015, David Boris did a literature review that you might have looked at 68 research studies that tried to relate safety professionals to organisational safety outcomes, and found only 2 studies where there was some correlation between either the presence or the performance of safety professionals within organisations and injury or fatality rates of all the research that we know of today. And there is no research that is able to demonstrate a causal link between the presence of safety people in organisations and organisational safety outcomes, irrespective of how you want to consider those safety outcomes, by way of injury, by way of culture, by way of systems, and so on. So with that as a backdrop, let's start. Let's talk about who we are. Let's talk about our mindset. Let's talk about how we approach our role within organisations. I'm going to talk through this in 3 steps. I'm going to give a few reflections on that title of authority and influence in our role in organisational decision making. I'm going to talk a little bit about the presence of safety professionals in the academic literature as it relates to this title, which is what do we know or what do we think we know about these roles. And then I'm going to provide some insights from resilience engineering safety to some of the new paradigms we might have already alluded to a little bit today, and use that as a lens to think about the safety professionals' roles, to start us thinking, and I'm hoping that we start to have broader but also more practical discussions about what our role is and could be in organisations. And then hopefully have some time, now that we've got an extra 15 minutes, to answer a few questions or for me to learn a little bit from you guys. So although I've been in the safety profession for quite a while, actually started, Bryce, you've had a few mentions today, mate, but we were peers in Queensland Rail in about '99, and then I've worked with a number of other people who are here in the room in various organisations. I'm currently living in Melbourne, but I am originally from this Toowoomba part of the world, but from Queensland. But it's only been about the last 4 or 5 years that I've really critically started to question what is that role of safety professionals in organisations, and it coincides with, I think, mine at least, but some of our professions changing paradigm about managing safety within organisations, and I don't think we can think about managing safety in organisations and not think about the role that we play. However, much of the debate and discussion, even at a conference like this, I think I may actually be the only one talking about something related to our role and our practice as professionals. The rest of the conversation is about safety stuff that other people are doing or should be doing or aren't doing well enough within the organisation. So let's spend a bit of time thinking about ourselves. Now, why I went back to this title was because when I was trying to answer that question of what is the role of safety professionals, I kind of concluded for myself that, well, organisations are groups of people, people making decisions, whatever those decisions may be, and ultimately our role should probably do to have a degree of steering over those organisational decisions in the interest of safety. Now, if you conclude, or I conclude, that might be an appropriate role for safety professionals to have, the question becomes what decisions and how. And I think those 2 questions are really important questions for us to first start to think about our role. And I believe that the decisions within organisations that have the most impact on safety outcomes are probably the ones that we're not making, we're not involved in making, or may not even be aware that are being made within the organisation. And think budgets, production targets, contracting strategies, business development, project execution, and so on. So these things that I think we learn through, we'll talk a little bit about disasters because I just could not do this without having a few disaster references, but those things that we learn that didn't go well are very rarely that, oh, this sentence was missed out of a safety policy and that's why the accident happened. It was more likely to be a more fundamental organisational decision that may not be the natural playground for ourselves and our influence or control within organisations. So they might be what decisions. So I think we need to think about what decisions and what we're involved in within the organisation. And the second piece, which is more goes to the title, is so how. So I sort of landed on this dichotomy that there's two approaches. We can steer decision making through an authority strategy or an authoritarian strategy, which means we take over the decision rights of others. So we assume decision-making power, authority, control, and others sort of have to give that to us, and I'll talk a little bit about how that might play out. And the second is through influence, which is decision rights and decisions stay in the place that they're being made by the people who are making them, but we find other ways to steer and influence. I'm going to talk a little bit about the circumstances around those different strategies, personal, relational, social strategies, and how that might then play into our mindset, our tasks, our activities, our symbols, and so on within the organisation. I'm hopefully shortly about to publish my literature review into safety professional research, and this is a chart that comes out of it. Now, there's more on that chart that I'm going to talk about, but that's a little bit like, hey, there'd be no reason for you to read the paper if I actually went through everything right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about authority and influence, and you'll see there I'm forming up the degree to which we hold firm or flexible views about the outcomes that the organisation needs to achieve or the processes that the organisation needs to adopt, and the extent to which we hold or believe we need to hold decision rights versus enabling others with decision rights to steer decisions in the interests of safety. In the early 2000s, so the safety literature is full of studies of the stuff we do in our jobs. Tasks, largely tasks in education. What do we do and what have we been taught, or what should we be taught? That's kind of what makes it up. And I think the largest study that I'm aware of on safety professionals, Hale and Goodemund in the early 2000s study surveyed 5,500 safety professionals across 12 countries and concluded that more than 60% of safety professionals everywhere are involved in policy, spend a significant portion of their time involved in policy and systems, procedures, JSAs, and task risk assessments and incident investigations. So academia goes, beauty, we know what safety people do, let's teach them how to do that. And then the professional association goes, oh, beauty, that's what we're teaching people, so let's accredit people to do that. Then we come out with these skills, that's what we do in the workplace. Organisations go, okay, well, that's what safety professionals do, and the cycle repeats. And I think the last 10 years at least, we've been a little bit on that treadmill cycle with the changing nature of safety education, the lack of research into or thinking about our role critically within organisations, and then the professional association, which are hosts of this, so it's not my position today to discredit the accreditation pathway of the Safety Institute, but I do believe we need to critically look at education and training of safety professionals. I believe if we continue with the approaches that we've had in the past in our role, particularly as generalist safety professionals, I think our role disappears from organisations within a generation. I believe we fundamentally, as we're seeing the paradigm shift, I think organisations will move and change their philosophies to safety, get braver, get different, and I think our role is so steeped in those traditional strategies employed by organisations to tackle safety. If the bureaucracy disappears, safety professionals don't need to administer that bureaucracy. So unless we've carved, which I believe there is, I believe there's a very valuable place for us in organisation, but it's very different to the place that we fill at the moment. Oh, we're not there yet. I want to talk a little bit about those two things, authority and influence, and how it might show up for us in our role. So authority, we've probably got a bit of an idea about what that is. That's enter the safety cop, right? So, we know speed limit 60, you weren't travelling at 60. here's your fine or your non-compliance or whatever it is. Now go off, go around the corner. Person may or may not travel at 60. Now you may not think you're a safety cop. I may not think I'm a safety cop. The research disagrees with us. So the research that has looked at professional practice concludes that always safety professionals are largely using authoritarian strategies to influence organisations' decision making. So how that shows up is senior management sanctions. Who goes to senior managers of the organisation to sanction safety programs or systems to drive middle management and frontline management to do certain things for safety. Senior management sanctions is a way of leveraging formal authority of the hierarchy. Do this because the system requires it. Audits, incident reporting, statistics, investigations, these are all ways of us telling our stories through using formal processes of the organisation to steer and control people's decision making and what they do. The thing about authority, and I might come back to the most fundamental thing about authority after I share a bit more. Beyond the research, and there's only a couple of people who have done research, the professional practice research is very, very thin. Only a handful of papers exist. But when you add to that the reviews of major disasters, which I said I'd speak about, the conclusion in relation to safety professionals reinforces that increased formal authority is likely to be a better way for organisations to take the role of safety professionals. So you have Dave Woods, we've talked about Columbia this morning, he was in the US Incident Investigation Board, said that safety professionals should have control over budgets. Safety professionals should have control over sending managers' workers to training courses that they determine when and what training courses they should go to. Safety managers should have the authority to veto management decision making or expert decision making at times if we want to do that as well. Hopkins, when he looked at Texas City, and you'd be familiar with some of his books, he talks a lot about the hierarchy, where safety sits in the hierarchy, how much access it's got to senior management sanctions, how much ability it's got to go over the heads of people who are meant to be making day in, day out decisions to create change. Haddon Cave said it with Nimrod, creating organisational structures that separate out safety independence from line management to control and to monitor and to veto. The problem is that greater authority creates in organisations the very thing that those same incident investigations say have caused the accident. So authoritarian compliance-based strategies cause the structural secrecy that Diane would talk about in Challenger. It closes down learning, closes down the openness of communication. So on one hand, our literature tells us, look, let's get better technical skills, more independence, more authority, more control. That same body of literature says all those things are likely to promote those things in organisations which we believe are vulnerabilities when it comes to preventing major disasters. So what is the alternative? Maybe that's okay. And I think one of the things that we need to conclude is if our approach to safety management, we want to take that approach, then increasing our authority is a good strategy to take. If we want to have a systems compliance-based approach that we may have had predominantly over the last 25 or 30 years, then that approach to our roles could be getting more formal authority, could actually make those existing approaches more effective within the organisation. If we want to shift our paradigm and promote as a profession or as individuals within organisations more resilience engineering safety 2 types approaches, that is incongruent with that mindset for ourselves as safety professionals. We need to have a different mindset, and I would suggest that the mindset is more one of influence than one of authority. Enter the safety friend. I didn't know how to label it. Safety cop was easy, but when you're coming up with these umbrella terms, you're kind of trying to understand what is the best term to use. And safety friend, it was actually one of the peer reviewers of the article said, well, one's just enemy, one's just friend. And I've gone, oh, maybe that's what it is. But a friend, there's a couple of things that I'll point out. Friends care, they listen, they support, they encourage, they learn, they're honest, and they're in it with you together. Now, influencing isn't always about agreeing. In fact, I came across a great quote from about 10 years ago that said, in relation to safety professionals and their relationship with line management, and said if 2 people in the same organisation always agree, then one of them's irrelevant. or unnecessary, basically. So influence is not about agreement at the starting point. It may be about agreement at the end point, it may not be. But I'd say influence is more about care and more about some other things that I'll talk to which are different to authority. There's sort of three things that show up. So if the literature on safety professionals and authority is kind of weak, we've been able to look at our roles because that's kind of how we've been doing our roles, I would argue. There's kind of much less when it comes to influence. Even the whole, I think, professional association would say that influencing skills are really important, full stop. And so, okay, great, I know that influencing skills are important, so what does that look like? And I think the literature goes on to kind of talk about kind of two things. One kind of knowledge-based, one kind of skill-based. So talk about interpersonal skills. That's another thing like influencing skills, like have good interpersonal skills. So okay guys, that's all I'm going to say, just have good interpersonal skills. But that doesn't really help us too much. Organisational context talks a lot about. So safety professionals not being familiar with the inner workings of their organisation, the people, the tasks, the technology. They've got more chance of influencing if they're more familiar with the business. That may be true for authority as well. You're more likely to come up with things that are more useful to people than necessarily influence. But the thing that I took away most in the reading about influence was the concept of credibility. And we talk about Pam Pride did a research masters that looked at trust between safety professionals and line management. And credibility is another one of those words, like influence, like interpersonal skills, that we just throw out there and expect people to know and understand what it's like. But the best thing that I took out of all of this in terms of credibility was, I think 2,000 years ago, Aristotle kind of laid down three fundamentals of someone feeling like someone else is credible. Or credibility is something that someone projects onto you, projects onto us. So our credibility as safety professionals is something that people project onto us based on three factors, and this has been tested in the last 30 years in relation to risk management, environmental management, and safety. First is concern and care. Does this person have any kind of concern and care for me? The second is knowledge. So to what extent do I believe this person knows what they're talking about, and to what extent do I believe they know my situation and the situation that we're discussing? And the third is openness and honesty. So I think one of the things is why do we think this? My analogies are always a risk of people going, I don't agree with that analogy, but if we think about doctors, and you and I debated this last night and had a different view, so that's why I put this preface out about this analogy. But in very simple terms, you go to a doctor, you believe they have some level of concern for you as a patient. Maybe some of their bedside manner may not prove to that, but you believe they have some concern for you. You believe they're knowledgeable, they go through medical exams and medical boards and they know what they're talking about and they know more about the situation than you do, and they're honest with you. They tell you what you've got and they probably tell you what you don't have as well, to the extent that they can. And we've got there's a great credibility in the medical profession, and I think some of it comes down to those fundamental things. So if you take something out today about influence, think about your role in relation to those three things. If you're trying to have a relationship and influence a line manager and you don't care about them as a person, I'd suggest you're going to struggle to influence them because they're going to pick up on that. I think the knowledge one is easy, and if you're not honest, you need to say, I agree with you. I think the take five is a waste of time. How are we going to change that in the organisation? You lose a lot of credibility when you're kind of just spieling off things that others either don't believe, and worse so, others don't even believe that you believe it anymore. I want to start talking a bit about tasks because, like I said, I've sat in these rooms and I've been practicing safety professional. Okay, that's all well and good, influence interpersonal skills, credibility, all great. But what do I do Monday morning at my desk? What do I do? What's my job? I think when we start thinking about what our role is as safety professionals, a number of us probably want to go to tasks, which is a sensible place to go because at the end of the day, in organisations, you probably should be doing something with your time. So I'm going to bring a few perspectives. I'm going to bring Eric Holnagel, Dave Woods, Sid Decker, because if you go to the resilience engineering literature, that's kind of the authors you're going to find in the last, longer than I've been reading about it, but particularly in the last 10 or 15 years. So Eric talks about 4 fundamentals or pillars of resilient organisations, and this is small because I'm going to build on this. I'm going to take 2 things I'm going to do. I'm going to completely oversimplify their theories, so don't take anything I say about these theories as any kind of authority on the subject. Go and read the papers. I'm also going to take some creative license and innovate a little bit with some of their frameworks. So I'm doing those 2 things. I know I'm doing those 2 things, so feel free to challenge me on the application, but it's probably been a conscious choice to apply it in that way, because I do want to think about what this body of literature might mean for us in terms of our mindset, tasks, and ways of doing our work. So, monitor, anticipate, respond, and learn. Monitor. We all do that now in organisations. What are we monitoring? Injury rates. We're probably, I don't know, what else are we monitoring? Training compliance. Rough. You guys all know what you're monitoring your job. How many of us are monitoring goal conflict in our organisation? Who's ahead of budget? Who's behind budget? Who's up on production? Who's down? Which projects are late? Where's there's resource scarcity in our organisation? Where's the safety margin getting really tight? Where are all the vacant positions, the new resources, the gaps in our competence? Where's the pockets of secrecy and drift and deviation that's happening, and the gap between organisational boundaries and all these things that we could be thinking about day in, day out in our role of monitoring within organisations if we didn't monitor the things that we're currently monitoring and anticipating the space to go, what is the organisational trajectory here? Okay, we're only completed 50% of our corrective maintenance last month. So what? Who spends time trying to create some strategic foresight or risk foresight in their organisation? Who thinks 6 months ahead? Looks at what's happening now in their organisation and goes, what might this mean in 6 months' time? That's anticipating, because what we're trying to do with these organisational decisions is change the trajectory of an organisation. So to do that, we need to respond, and I'll come back to authority and influence in a minute, but response. And the response might be, okay, my lost time injury rate's going down, that's great, or however, whatever is out in our current toolkit. But if we think about, and I don't think I can do this in my organisation, so I'm not standing here from a position of saying that I'm anywhere near performing the role probably any different to how you are performing it within your organisation. You may actually be performing it much better than I am. But responses. So what if the safety department was able to understand the current status of maintenance, integrity, instrumentation functioning, the absence of flares at Texas City, and be able to influence the trajectory of the engineering, maintenance and finance and senior management of BP to change the trajectory of the resources going into the Texas City asset? What if so you speak on the first day and all the disasters are taken by lunchtime? I'm not actually going to come up with any. I'm going to leave some out because they've already been done way too much. I thought I'd be. Shouldn't, from a QRA point of view, I should have known that Fukushima would be taken. But I wonder if the safety department could have thought about the foundation heights for the reactor at Fukushima and the 1 in 100 year tidal surge heights, and thought about what that design might look like, and how many of us get involved in detailed design processes and ask questions and check assumptions and look into the QRAs. I don't do it in my organisation. I rarely even know the status of actions out of those HAZOP and QRA type processes without digging deep into project files within the organisation. So that monitor, anticipate, respond, and then learn, which is, okay, we know the actual, we know what's happened, so how do we build that back into our organisation to make our organisation more resilient in the future? And I found that thinking about this kind of a resilience framework and really testing my day-to-day tasks in my role, testing it with what we think we know about what creates or doesn't create those major safety incidents. Dave Woods did actually turn his mind to the safety profession during his involvement with Columbia. And there's actually a chapter in one of the early resilience engineering books about designing a safety organisation. He came up with his 4 I's of a safety organisation. Informative, independent, involved and informed, and didn't necessarily talk a lot about tasks, and there's some things in there that I think are quite steeped in some of my earlier comments about being independent so as to make decisions on behalf of management. But at a principal level, I find if you are going to read some of this stuff, it's probably the best thing. Wanted to make sure I wanted to say the best thing, but the best thing I've read in terms of the safety profession through reading all the research. And he sort of plays this really, plays out this quite difficult role for safety professionals in organisations, and being involved, being close to the action. So being involved in decision-making processes as they're happening, being involved in management teams, knowing and understanding sites, where they're at, projects, engineering, design, just being fully immersed and involved in the inner workings of the organisation, the formal, the informal, and all of those things. But at the same time, being able to be sufficiently independent of the system to be able to challenge the assumptions, the beliefs, the models of risk that system has. So you could already get a picture of the dichotomy there between being close enough to the action to be able to see it, but being cognitively or socially distant enough to be able to provide a lens over that, which may be different to the lens that the organisation is holding. And informed is a little bit like being involved in processes, but being informed about what's going on. Informative is actually a bit like responding. The safety professional actually providing useful information and advice into the organisation and to those who are making decisions. But I found the most challenging thing for me is to try to understand how we balance that involved and independent role that we might have, and how that plays into, because independence is easy if you've got formal authority, but if you're actually trying to influence, you need and challenge, maintain a relationship socially, organisationally, individually, that's incredibly complicated. And I'm going to assume that most people are safety professionals, and I'm going to assume that most people have spent probably more times than people in most professions being frustrated with their inability to steer organisations the way that they would like them to be steered. I will conclude with Sydney Decker's kind of perspective, and Michelle's put these up. We don't compare slides. Michelle's been here too, so if there's overlap, that's great, but you're going to have to hear it again. But Sydney would say people are the solution, not the problem to control, and I think this goes great into influence and into authority. If we have the mindset in our role that we need to control people who are making decisions in the organisation, we need to control management, we need to control the workforce, I'm saying that's the wrong mindset for us to approach our role from. I believe if we follow that kind of mindset ideology that people are a solution, then our role becomes all about support and enablement and understanding and friendship than it does about control. Safety is a responsibility. So this one I really struggle with in my role, being in a corporate part of an organisation. The time I spend doing things which I think are actually going to make a difference to actual safety in the organisation, and like Drew would say, the time I spend actually providing the mantra of false assurance for the organisation to remove anxiety is kind of, for me, unfortunately, too disproportionate for my liking. And I don't know if it's possible ever to remove that that bureaucratic part out of organisation, but I would love to see the day where there was nothing that I was doing in my role that I didn't believe had a direct and real connection to safety within the organisation and the support of the things in the organisation that create safety. Fundamental to that is actually being able to know what those things are that create safety, and I think we're still struggling with actually knowing what those positive capacities in organisations are. And this is kind of the third point, is actually when you kind of thinking about what those positive capacities are in organisations that create safety, and I think we're all understanding that those things in organisations that create disaster are exactly the same things that create success every day. Organisations don't radically change one day when they have their incident and the day before they're a completely different organisation. No, they won't. So the real challenge here, I think, is to try to understand those things that may be present in our organisation every day, but most of the time we just aren't having the incident as a result. And some of those things I spoke to earlier. The most interesting, I don't believe in leading indicators for safety. I don't believe in any kind of organisational safety metrics, full stop. So I'll put that out there. So don't come to me and say, I want to move from lagging indicators to leading indicators. If you've still got safety in the indicator conversation, not interested. So just out there. So because I actually think we need to, as a profession, not go. We want to go to leading indicators. Not because in 1994 there was a paper, peer-reviewed paper, that said, thank God that's the end of LTI's frequency rate. And we've moved on from that, and we're enlightened. We don't need to count injuries because it's not useful anymore, and we're kind of still 25. That was actually the second vision. That would have been the second visions. So the second vision, someone probably came along here and went. I was in high school and went. Good. We're never going to have to measure and worry about LTI rates anymore because they're not useful. But what I am interested in is those things in organisation which I believe goal conflict is something that shows up and is present in my own decision making, and I believe in the decision making of others in organisations. And when I say shows up in my own, in that I'm more likely to knowingly take risk and remove controls in my life when I'm under goal conflict pressure. Simple example for me is I'm pretty good at waiting for a green man to cross a road. If I was 5 minutes late for a meeting with my CEO and it was a red light, I would run across that road. So for me, the example is and we might do it speeding, we need to be somewhere on time or something. And when we think about Macondo and the well was late, the rig needed to move, either the schedule, the production, the cost, pressure, the conflict that comes into safety is what, in my belief, is what erodes safety margins. So our indicator conversation for me should be finding ways to actually understand goal conflict and then how that exerts itself into social and political pressure on individuals making decisions within the organisation. So that's why I want to leave. I kind of don't like when I'm sitting at the table and people sort of throw out all these ideas and go, okay, so how might I think about that? What might I do with that? So I try to put a few more practical examples of things to think about. But I do want to go back to the title, and I do want to go back to a statement I made earlier. I do believe if we don't change our role, that our role will disappear from organisations. And I think the best example for that is the quality management function. Now, I don't know how many organisations still have a quality manager or a quality management team, quality department within their organisation. Healthcare, pharmaceuticals, mainly industries. Healthcare, okay.
Health.
Sorry?
Health,
okay. Volkswagen, Toyota, all had quality departments as well. Probably authority, sort of compliance-based quality departments. I was responsible for quality in a former life. And companies had directors of quality, total quality management systems, quality cultures, quality leadership. It's gone in the last decade. Organisations just went, one, quality is a fundamental part of people managing their job. We're not being provided with anything additional or new from the quality department or the quality systems. Now, safety might be a slightly more sacred cow because of a whole raft of perceived legal liabilities on individuals. Why I say perceived is, I think, a bit about the overreaction to regulation. But I believe if we don't fundamentally change our role, I just can't see generalist safety professionals. And I can see that with, don't think that I don't think HR professionals or any other generalist management, if they're teaching the subject in an MBA program, and it's a generalist type subject, I think as the squeeze comes, it may actually disappear from organisations. Unless we're providing some kind of value that we can demonstrate to the organisation and the organisation understands. So I did want to cycle back around with that, and I did want to cycle back around on the title of authority and influence. And this wasn't to say that one's good or one's not so good, or probably left you with that impression. I think our approach to our role has to be congruent with our approach to safety within organisations. And what I do want to point out is that I think our role in the past has been quite congruent with the way that we've approached safety in organisations. And I think we're at this chicken and egg thing, where our paradigm's shifting, but I'm seeing a lot of shift in my conversations with people in the profession around their safety philosophy. I'm not seeing the same kind of dialogue, discussion, discourse, reflection around our mindset and our philosophies about our professional role within organisations, and I think we need to think about those two things in parallel with each other, because one won't be successful without the other. Either the organisation will move on in its safety ideology and actually probably get people who are better suited to doing safety in a safety 2 world, which is the psychologists that have had a hard time, the socials. I think if you're going to go and do, I'd say professional development, two last parting thoughts, and then I'm getting a little bit the hurry up. If you want to do some professional development, I think do some social psychology, sociology, anthropology type, understand how complex networks of people operate and read up in that space. And maybe start with Diane Vaughan's 9-year research into ethnographic research into Challenger. It's really, really helpful picture of organisational life. And the second thing is, or spend some time in a frontline high hazard role. So we don't think of that as professional development, but go and take an operating role within your organisation for a while. Go drive a truck, or go be an assistant labourer on a construction site, and actually just understand the ins and outs of day-to-day work and how safety looks when you're looking back out at it rather than looking through that lens into the organisation. And with that, questions? Thank you.
Thanks, David. We do have 3 or 4 minutes if people would like to ask any questions.
Yeah, Dave, so you see generalists possibly going by the wayside. What about the more special sort of technical services?
So I think there's a hugely important role for technical expertise in organisations, however it shows up, whether you're a hygienist, an aviation safety specialist, a process safety engineer. I think that specialist advice, the ability to provide technical support is not going to, unless it can be automated, it's probably not going to disappear. But that just general facilitation, management systems, process-orientated role of the generalist, I think, needs to do more than what we're currently doing in organisations for organisations to continue to see value in it. Bit of you, yeah.
I noticed that you've got an MBA. What is your take on introducing business management skills and knowledge into health and safety, professional role and training?
Literature talks about it a lot, about business skills. I think it's really important to have. The challenge with safety roles, which I say is, I think it's the hardest role in an organisation. Personally believe that, because the role has to actually have some level of understanding how the organisation works top to the front, everywhere, and also everywhere across. How the procurement system works, how the HR system works, how the finance system works, how budgeting process, and have relationships and understanding of different industries sometimes, different geographies, it's, I would argue, the most difficult role to get across. So anything that gets you across understanding some aspect of that organisation is useful. And I did an MBA for purposes because I believe that it sort of helped us differentiate yourself as a safety person to have an MBA, and at the time I probably didn't think of it as that, but it's proven to me over time to be very useful in me actually having some conceptual understanding of what a finance department does and how budgeting and return on capital kind of works. And I think the less we know about parts of our organisation, the less ability we have to understand how the system as a whole functions. Now, we can never know how the system as a whole, but I think the more we do to appreciate how the system as a whole functions, the better. So that's why I say less safety-specific training and more breadth would be strategy. Is that done? One more?
Thanks, Jeff.
With what we've heard over the morning, is it now starting to become confusing for us as safety professionals, especially I've been here for 46 years? I'm also an ISO auditor. Now we're starting to get challenged as to what should the business be looking like as an auditor, as well as what's the standard asking of us to validate and get evidence of. I'm starting to think we've got to now start thinking about how to answer those specific answers that we're doing at ISO auditors.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly confusing. I'm more confused, after 20 years, I'd say I'm more confused now than I've been at any point in my career about the role of safety professionals and how to craft the most valuable role. But as an ISO auditing, I think the traditional ISO auditing, I'm not sure how much value it adds. Maybe it will be incredibly value to go, how does your organisation deal with businesses or projects that are over schedule and over budget? How does your organisation deal with that? What happens if Macondo's a month late and the business goes, oh, it doesn't matter. You have another month. It just doesn't matter. Just finish the well off properly. And I think this is the discussion between the safety professional and the CEO. I think the CEO is looking for the safety person to solve safety with their safety toolkit. My view is safety actually doesn't get solved with our safety toolkit. Safety gets solved with the toolkit that the organisation, particularly the organisation at senior leadership, has, and fundamentally into how those things work. Because there's no safety process that protects against the pressure to spend $1 million a day on a rig and just get it off location. It might be, yeah. So I think it must be incredibly challenging in that space at the moment.
Certainly.
More questions.
It's changing.
More questions and answers.